My breath caught the moment I saw him standing by the pool's edge, the CEO, Julian Ashford, staring at me like I was something he wanted to own. My name is Jackson. 6 months ago, I was just another broke college student juggling 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the day, I taught swimming lessons at the local community pool, and at night, I waited tables at a downtown diner. The tips were decent, but never enough. Student loans haunted my dreams, and my studio apartment had more problems than square footage. Life was exhausting, but I was surviving. Then everything changed when I received an email from Ashford Estate. The subject line read, "Private swimming instruction opportunity, competitive compensation." I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But curiosity won. The email explained that they needed someone to teach their young son how to swim. The pay they offered was more than I made in 3 months combined. I responded within minutes. 2 days later, I was driving through wrought iron gates that seemed to stretch toward the sky. The driveway curved through manicured gardens, past marble fountains, and finally opened to reveal a mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie. White columns framed the entrance, and the architecture screamed old money. I parked my beat-up Honda next to a row of luxury cars and suddenly felt very out of place. A housekeeper led me through halls decorated with art I couldn't name but knew was expensive. We walked through French doors onto a stone patio, and that's when I saw it. The pool. It wasn't just big, it was Olympic-sized, with crystal-clear water that reflected the afternoon sun like liquid sapphire. Lounge chairs lined one side, and a pool house sat at the far end. Probably bigger than my entire apartment. But the pool wasn't what stopped me in my tracks. It was the little boy hiding behind a woman in a gray uniform. He peeked out at me with eyes the color of a summer sky. Wide and cautious. His brown curls were slightly messy, and he clutched the nanny's skirt with small fists. I approached slowly, lowering myself to his eye level. Distance made people less threatening, especially to scared kids. I'd learned that teaching dozens of children who feared the water. "Hey there," I said gently, offering a smile. "I'm Jackson. What's your name?" The boy pressed closer to the nanny, but his curiosity was winning over fear. "Jax," he whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "Jax. That's a cool name. Strong." I glanced at the pool, then back at him. "So Jax, what do you think about that pool?" His expression shifted to pure anxiety. "I'm scared of water. It's too deep. I can't breathe in there." My heart squeezed. This kid wasn't just nervous, he was genuinely terrified. I'd seen this before: children who'd had bad experiences or simply never learned to trust the water. Pushing them never worked. Patience did. "You know what? That's completely okay," I told him. "We don't have to go in today. How about we just hang out by the pool? Maybe put our feet in? No pressure." Jax looked uncertain, but something in his posture relaxed slightly. Just feet. Promise." That first session, we sat on the pool's edge. I talked about everything except swimming, his favorite cartoons, what games he liked, whether he preferred pizza or burgers. Slowly, he opened up. When I dangled my legs in the water, he watched intently. By the end of the hour, he dipped one toe in, then quickly pulled it back out. But he smiled. That was progress. Over the next few weeks, Jax transformed. Each lesson built on the last. He started calling me Jaxie, because pronouncing Jackson was apparently too much work for a 7-year-old tongue. I didn't mind. Actually, I liked it. He'd splash me playfully, laugh when I pretended to lose races in the shallow end, and eventually he was floating on his back while I supported him, trust shining in those blue eyes. I didn't realize I was getting attached until I found myself thinking about him outside of work. Wondering if he'd eaten his vegetables at dinner, if he'd had nightmares, if he was happy. This job had become more than a paycheck. It had become something I looked forward to. Something that made me feel like I was making a real difference. Then came the day everything shifted. I was in the shallow end with Jax, teaching him proper arm strokes when I heard footsteps, precise, measured, confident. I looked up, water dripping from my hair, and froze. The man approaching was impossible to miss. He wore a navy suit tailored so perfectly it looked painted on. His dark hair was styled with calculated precision, and his jawline could cut glass. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Gray, sharp, penetrating. This was someone used to reading people, dissecting them, finding weaknesses. Julian Ashford, the CEO, the father. He stopped at the pool's edge, hands in his pockets, and his entire demeanor radiated control. When he looked at Jax, though, his expression melted into genuine warmth. "Looking good, champ," Julian said, his voice smooth and rich. Jax's entire face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy, look, I'm swimming. Watch this." He kicked his legs enthusiastically, sending water splashing everywhere. Julian chuckled, a sound that seemed rare and valuable. "I see that. You're doing amazing." Then those gray eyes shifted to me. The warmth evaporated, replaced by intense scrutiny. I suddenly felt very aware of my wet t-shirt clinging to my chest, my messy hair, my complete lack of professional polish. "You must be Jackson," he said, extending a hand. I climbed out of the pool, water streaming off me, and shook his hand. His grip was firm, authoritative, the kind of handshake that meant business. "Yes, sir. Nice to finally meet you, Julian," he corrected, but he didn't release my hand immediately. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, so briefly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Please, call me Julian. You've accomplished something remarkable with Jax. I've hired 3 instructors before you, none lasted more than 2 sessions. He wouldn't even get in the pool." I pulled my hand back, trying to ignore the tingling sensation his touch left behind. "Jax is a great kid. He just needed someone to meet him where he was." Julian's gaze intensified, like he was analyzing every word, every micro-expression. "Indeed. I'd like to discuss something with you. My office, tonight at 8. Does that work?" It wasn't really a question. It was a command wrapped in polite phrasing. "Of course," I agreed, though my stomach twisted with uncertainty. Julian nodded once, then turned to Jax. "Keep up the good work, champ. I'm proud of you." He ruffled his son's wet curls, and for a moment he looked like any other dad. Then the mask slid back into place, and he walked away, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and unspoken expectations. Jax tugged on my arm. "Jaxie, are you going to talk to Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy. Just some grown-up stuff. Nothing to worry about." But I was worried, because the way Julian had looked at me wasn't how employers typically looked at employees. There was something else beneath that polished exterior, something hungry, something searching. That evening, I stood outside Julian's office door, heart hammering against my ribs. I knocked twice. "Come in," his voice called from inside. The office matched the man. Sleek, powerful, intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline at dusk. A massive mahogany desk dominated the space, and behind it sat Julian, now in a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. He held a glass of amber liquid, probably whiskey, and gestured to the leather chair across from him. "Sit, Jackson." I sat, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Julian studied me for a long moments, sipping his drink. The silence stretched uncomfortably until he finally spoke. "Jax hasn't smiled like that in 2 years. Not since his mother left us." His voice was quiet but edged with old pain. "I've hired therapists, specialists, tutors. Nothing worked. Then you walked in, and suddenly my son is laughing again. He trusts you. Do you understand how rare that is? I'm just doing my job." "No." He set down his glass with deliberate precision. "You're doing far more than that, which is why I'm offering you a full-time, live-in position." My mouth went dry. "Live-in?" "There's a guest house on the property. Fully furnished, private, comfortable. 6-figure salary, full benefits, health insurance. You'd work exclusively with Jax, teaching him swimming, helping with activities, providing consistent care." Julian leaned forward, elbows on his desk, eyes locked on mine. "Jax needs someone who won't leave. Someone stable, someone he can depend on." He paused, and the air between us felt charged. "And frankly, Jackson, I need someone I can trust. Someone reliable. Someone—" He trailed off, but his gaze said everything his words didn't. My pulse raced. "This is a big decision." "It is. Take the night. Think about it carefully." Julian stood, walking around the desk until he was directly in front of me. close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. But understand something, Jackson. Once you become part of this family, once you're in my world, leaving isn't simple. I protect what's mine, fiercely. The way he said mine sent shivers down my spine. I left that office with my head spinning, his words echoing in my mind. By morning I'd made my decision. I sent the acceptance email before I could second-guess myself. I had no idea I was stepping into the most complicated chapter of my life. 3 days after accepting Julian's offer, I moved into the guest house with 2 suitcases and a growing sense that this job would challenge every boundary I'd ever set. Calling it a guest house was like calling the Grand Canyon a ditch. The place had vaulted ceilings, hardwood floors, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know how to use, and a bedroom with a bed so large I could starfish without touching the edges. The bathroom had heated floors. I'd never experienced luxury like this, and part of me felt guilty for enjoying it so much. I was unpacking when I heard rapid knocking. Before I could answer, the door burst open and Jax barreled in, clutching his worn teddy bear, eyes sparkling with excitement. "Jaxie, you really live here now? You're not leaving?" I crouched down to his level, grinning. "Nope. I'm staying right here, buddy. We're neighbors now." Jax threw himself at me in a hug so fierce it nearly knocked me over. "This is the best day ever." Movement in the doorway caught my attention. Julian stood there, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, watching us. He changed from his usual suit into dark jeans and a gray Henley that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. His expression was softer than I'd ever seen it. After Jax ran off to explore the rest of the guest house, Julian stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Everything meeting your standards?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "This is incredible. Thank you." He nodded, then his expression shifted to something more serious. "Starting tomorrow, your schedule adjusts slightly. Jax wakes at 7, but I'm in the gym by 6. I'd like you to join me." I blinked. "Join you? In the gym?" "Consider it part of your responsibilities. Accountability helps maintain discipline." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Plus, it'll give us time to discuss Jax's progress without him present." Something about the request felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint why. "All right." 6 a.m. The next morning, my alarm blared at 5:45. I dragged myself out of bed, pulled on shorts and a tank top, and made my way to the main house's private gym. The space was better equipped than any commercial gym I'd ever seen. State-of-the-art machines, free weights, a boxing area, even a small rock-climbing wall. Julian was already there, running on a treadmill. He wore athletic shorts and a fitted shirt that left very little to the imagination. The man was in ridiculous shape, all lean muscle and controlled power. When he noticed me, he slowed the treadmill and grabbed a towel. Punctual, good quality. He stepped off, breathing only slightly elevated. "We'll start with compound movements. You familiar with those?" "Somewhat. I usually stick to bodyweight exercises." "Not anymore. You're training with me now." The session was intense. Julian pushed me through exercises I'd never attempted, correcting my form with clinical precision. But it was the way he corrected me that made my skin prickle with awareness. His hands on my shoulders, adjusting my posture during squats. His voice low in my ear, counting reps while standing behind me during bench presses. Every touch was professional, but it lasted a fraction too long. Every word was appropriate, but carried an undertone I couldn't decipher. Afterward, as we drank water, Julian leaned against the weight rack and studied me with those penetrating gray eyes. "You're in decent shape. Do you enjoy working out?" "When I have time. College didn't leave much room for consistent routines." "Well, now you have all the time you need. And proper equipment." He paused. "And a training partner." Something in his tone made my stomach flip, but before I could respond, he was walking away toward the showers, leaving me standing there with my pulse inexplicably racing. The afternoons with Jax were entirely different. We fell into an easy rhythm, swimming lessons followed by lunch, then activities around the estate. Jax had fully come out of his shell, chattering constantly about everything from dinosaurs to what his teacher said about volcanoes. He showed me his favorite hiding spots in the garden, his collection of rocks that definitely had fossils, and his drawings that covered his bedroom walls. One afternoon after we'd finished swimming, Jax looked up at me with those earnest blue eyes and said, "Jaxie, you're my best friend." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "You're my best friend too, Jax." He grabbed my hand, his small fingers barely wrapping around mine. "Promise you'll stay forever, forever," I said, linking our pinkies in a solemn promise. Unknown to us, Julian was watching from the pool deck. When I finally noticed him there, something in his expression made my breath catch. Vulnerability, longing, maybe even jealousy. Jax ran inside to put away his swim gear, leaving Julian and me alone. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets. "He's completely attached to you. The feeling's mutual. He's an incredible kid." Julian's hand reached out, settling on my shoulder. His palm was warm through my damp shirt. "Thank you for being here, for caring about him the way you do." His hand lingered, fingers pressing gently into my shoulder blade, before sliding down my arm in a touch that definitely crossed professional lines. Then he walked away, leaving me standing there wondering if I'd imagined the intimacy of that gesture. Evenings became my favorite time because I got to put Jax to bed. We'd established a routine, teeth-brushing assistance, pajama wrestling matches, which he always won. And then story time. He loved tales about brave knights and space explorers, and he'd curl against my side, his small body relaxed and trusting. One night, mid-story about a dragon who just wanted friends, Jax interrupted me. "Jaxie, do you ever get sad?" The question surprised me. "Sometimes. Everyone does." "Why?" "Daddy's always sad. Even when he smiles." Jax's voice was small. "But since you came, he smiles for real. I can tell the difference." My chest constricted. "Your dad loves you very much, Jax." "I know, but he's lonely. Like I was before you." He looked up at me with those two wise eyes. "Now neither of us are lonely anymore." Before I could formulate a response, his breathing evened out. He'd fallen asleep mid-conversation. I tucked the blanket around him, turned off the lamp, and slipped into the hallway. Julian was waiting there, leaning against the wall like he'd been there a while. "He opens up to you," Julian said quietly. "Tells you things he never shares with me. He loves you, Julian. Sometimes kids just need different outlets." Julian's jaw tightened. "Can we talk? Privately?" We ended up on the terrace overlooking the grounds. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens below. City lights twinkled in the distance. Julian stood at the railing, silent for so long I wondered if he'd forgotten I was there. Finally he spoke. "I need to be honest about something." My heart rate spiked. "What is it?" He turned to face me, and even in the dim light, I could see the conflict in his expression. "Jax's mother didn't just leave. She abandoned us. Said this lifestyle was suffocating, that I was suffocating. She walked out when Jax was 5 and never looked back. No calls, no visits, nothing." "Julian, I'm so—" He held up a hand. "Let me finish." Jax blamed himself. Thought if he was better, smarter, quieter, she'd come back. He started pushing people away first, before they could leave him. It became a pattern. Until you— He stepped closer and I could smell his cologne mixed with night air. "With you, he's vulnerable. Open. And that terrifies me." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because if you leave, Jackson, it won't just break his heart. It'll shatter him completely." He paused, gray eyes searching mine in the darkness. "And I don't think I could survive watching that happen. Not again." The confession hung between us, heavy with meaning. My breath came shallow as he stepped even closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I won't leave," I whispered. "I promise you that." Relief flooded his features. His hand rose, fingers wrapping around my shoulder before slowly sliding down. His touch deliberate and intimate, until his fingers encircled my wrist. His thumb found my pulse point, and I knew he could feel how my heart was racing. "Thank you," he breathed. We stood there too close, the air charged with something neither of us was ready to name. And in that moment I realized with startling clarity that I wasn't just Jax's caretaker anymore. I was becoming part of something much more complicated, something that involved the man standing inches away from me, looking at me like I was both his salvation and his greatest risk. The following week, Our routine solidified into something that felt dangerously domestic. Morning gym sessions with Julian, afternoons teaching Jax, evenings filled with bedtime stories and stolen glances at a man I shouldn't be noticing the way I was. But I was noticing. God help me. I was noticing everything. During one morning workout, Julian was performing deadlifts and I moved behind him to check his form. My hands settled on his lower back, adjusting his position slightly. He went completely still. "Your hands are freezing," he said, but there was amusement in his tone rather than complaint. I jerked my hands away. "Sorry. I should've. I didn't ask you to stop." His eyes found mine in the mirror, holding my gaze with an intensity that made my stomach flip. I said they were cold. Not that I minded. He finished his set, racked the weights, and turned to face me fully. We were standing close in the confined space between equipment, close enough that I had to tilt my head up to maintain eye contact. "You have a talent for this," he said quietly. "Taking care of people, making them feel seen." "I'm just trying to help." "You do more than help, Jackson." His hand came up, ostensibly to grab his towel from the bench beside me, but his arm brushed against mine. The contact sent electricity racing across my skin. "Jax is thriving in ways I never thought possible." And he trailed off, something conflicted flashing across his features. "I feel lighter when you're around. Like I can breathe properly for the first time in years." Before I could process that confession, he was walking toward the showers, leaving me standing there with my heart attempting to break free from my ribcage. That afternoon with Jax brought a different kind of emotional intensity. After our swim session, he wanted to show me around the estate's extensive grounds. We walked through gardens where roses bloomed in impossible colors, past a small pond with koi fish, until we reached a structure I hadn't seen before. A gazebo tucked away behind weeping willows. Jax's demeanor changed instantly. His usual energy dimmed and he stared at the gazebo with sad eyes. "Mom used to bring me here," he said softly. "We'd have tea parties with my stuffed animals. She called it our secret place." He looked up at me, eyes glistening. "Do you think she remembered?" I knelt beside him, my heart breaking for this little boy who'd been abandoned by someone who should have cherished him. "I think people remember the important things, even if they can't show it the way we want them to." "Are you going to forget me too, when you leave?" The question hit like a physical blow. I cupped his small face in my hands, making sure he could see the truth in my eyes. "Jax, listen to me carefully. I am not leaving. I promised you that, remember? Pinky promise is forever." He threw his arms around my neck, clinging tight. I held him until his breathing calmed, until the tension left his small body. When we finally headed back to the house, he kept my hand clasped in his, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. Julian was waiting on the patio. He watched us approach, Jax gripping my hand, me ruffling his hair, and something shifted in his expression. It wasn't quite jealousy, but rather a deep yearning, like he wanted to be part of that easy affection but didn't know how. That night, after Jax was asleep, Julian summoned me to his study. This was unusual. We typically only spoke during workouts or in passing. When I entered, he was sitting on the leather sofa instead of behind his imposing desk, a glass of whiskey in hand. His tie was loosened, top buttons of his shirt undone, and he looked more human than I'd ever seen him. "Sit down, Jackson." It wasn't a command this time, it was almost a plea. I took the armchair across from him, trying to ignore how the lamplight cast shadows across his sharp features. He took a long sip of whiskey before speaking. "You've been here nearly a month. Has it been that long already?" 32 days. He said it with such precision that I knew he'd been counting. "In 32 days, you've transformed this house." Jax laughs constantly. The staff actually smile. And I. He set down his glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I find myself looking forward to mornings. Not because of business calls or board meetings, but because I know you'll be there, in the gym, talking about nothing and everything. Just existing in the same space." My mouth went dry. "Julian, let me finish." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up his usually perfect styling. "I know this is inappropriate. You work for me. You're here because of Jax. I have no right to feel what I'm feeling." He looked up at me and the raw vulnerability in his gray eyes stole my breath. But I can't ignore it anymore. Tell me I'm not imagining this tension between us. Tell me you feel it too. I should have lied, should have maintained professional distance, should have done 100 things that weren't what I actually did. I feel it, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Julian stood abruptly and crossed the space between us in 2 strides. He towered over me and I had to crane my neck to look at him. There was something wild in his expression now, something unleashed. This is complicated, I continued, forcing myself to speak even as my thoughts scattered. Jax needs stability. If something happens between us and it falls apart, I know the risks. His voice cracked slightly. Do you think I haven't been fighting this? Do you think I haven't tried to convince myself it's just gratitude or loneliness or any other rational explanation? He reached down, his hands framing my face with a gentleness that contradicted his intensity. But the truth is, Jackson, I'm falling for you. Hard and fast and completely. And I have no idea how to stop it. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain he could hear it. Julian, tell me to walk away. Tell me this crosses too many lines. Tell me anything that will make this stop. His forehead came to rest against mine, and his breath ghosted across my lips. But don't tell me you don't feel the same pull. Don't lie to me about that. I couldn't lie. Didn't want to lie. I feel it too, I confessed. God help me. I feel exactly the same way. The last thread of his control snapped. Julian kissed me with a desperation that matched my own. His lips were firm yet surprisingly soft, and he kissed like he was drowning and I was oxygen. My hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he made a sound low in his throat that sent heat racing through my veins. The kiss deepened, turned hungry. His hands slid from my face to my waist, pulling me up from the chair and against his body. I could feel the rapid beat of his heart matching the frantic pace of my own. When we finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Julian pressed his forehead to mine again. Stay with me tonight, he whispered. I'm not asking for, I just don't want to be alone. Please. Okay, I breathed. We went to his bedroom, a space I'd never entered before. It was masculine and clean, dominated by a massive bed with charcoal gray linens. Julian didn't turn on the overhead lights, just a small lamp that cast everything in warm amber tones. We lay down on top of the covers, facing each other, close but not quite touching. No words were exchanged. We simply existed in that space together, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Eventually, Julian reached out and threaded his fingers through mine. Thank you for not running. Where would I run to? This is where I want to be. His eyes searched mine in the dim light, looking for doubt or hesitation. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he finally allowed his eyes to close, his grip on my hand never loosening. I watched him fall asleep, watched the tension drain from his features, watched him look peaceful in a way I suspected was rare for him, and I knew with absolute certainty that we'd crossed a line tonight that we could never uncross. Everything was different now, complicated and messy and potentially explosive. But as Julian's breathing evened out into sleep and as my own exhaustion pulled me under, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. We'd stepped off the cliff together. Now we just had to hope we'd learn to fly before we hit the ground. Morning light filtered through the curtains when I woke, disoriented for a moment before remembering where I was. Julian's bedroom. Julian's bed. With Julian still asleep beside me, his face relaxed in a way I'd never seen while he was awake. The CEO mask was completely gone, leaving behind someone who looked almost vulnerable. I tried to slip out quietly, but the moment I moved, his eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, then sharpened as awareness returned. Morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep, deeper than usual. Morning. I need to check on Jax before he wakes up. His hand wrapped around my wrist, gentle but firm. Hold on. We should discuss what happened. My stomach nodded. Here it came. The regret, the backpedaling, the inevitable conversation about maintaining boundaries. I have no regrets about last night, Julian said firmly, reading my expression. Do you? I searched his face for any hint of doubt but found only determination mixed with that vulnerability I was starting to recognize. No regrets. Then we're clear on that. He released my wrist and sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. However, we need discretion. Jax can't find out yet. Not until we understand what we're building here. Agreed, he's the priority. We returned to our routine, but everything had shifted. The morning gym sessions took on new dimensions. Julian's hands correcting my posture lingered with obvious intention now. His fingers would trace down my spine when adjusting my deadlift form, or press into my shoulders during stretching in ways that made my breath hitch. We'd exchange loaded glances in the mirror, small smiles that held entire conversations. But around Jax we maintained perfect professionalism. I was still his caretaker, Julian was still his father. We never touched unnecessarily, never let our eyes linger too long. We played our roles flawlessly, except Jax was more perceptive than we'd given him credit for. One afternoon we were having lunch on the patio, just Jax and me. Since Julian had a conference call, Jax was methodically picking pepperoni off his pizza and arranging them in a pattern when he suddenly looked up at me. "Jaxie, do you like my dad?" I nearly choked on my water. "Of course I do. He's been very kind to me." Jax's face scrunched up in concentration. "No, I mean different. Special like." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What makes you ask that, buddy?" "'Cause of how you look at each other. How dad smiles when you're around. Really smiles, not the fake one he uses for work people." His blue eyes were too knowing for a 7-year-old. Like in the movies when people really care about someone. I chose my words carefully. "Your dad and I are close friends. Good friends who care about each other." "Oh." He brightened immediately. "That's good. Dad needs friends. He was always alone before you came." He threw his arms around me in an impulsive hug before running off to play, leaving me sitting there with my pulse racing. If Jax could notice, who else might see through our careful facade? That evening, after Jax was asleep, Julian sent me a text, "Garden. Now." I found him sitting on a stone bench under the pergola, moonlight casting silver patterns through the climbing vines overhead. He patted the space beside him, and when I sat, he immediately took my hand. "Jax asked me something today," Julian began quietly. "He wanted to know if I was happy." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That yes, for the first time in years, I actually am." He turned to face me fully. "You did that, Jackson. You brought happiness back into this house." My chest tightened with emotion. "Julian, I need to say this." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "I know we're keeping this quiet. I know it's complicated with Jax and the company and a dozen other factors. But I want you to know something beyond any doubt. I'm completely committed to this. To us. Whatever happens, wherever this goes, I'm not running." I cupped his face in my hands, feeling the slight stubble along his jaw. "Neither am I." We kissed under the stars, slow and thorough, a promise sealed without words. But the universe apparently had other plans. The following week, Eleanor arrived without warning. Julian's former mother-in-law swept onto the property like an ice storm. All designer clothes and cold disapproval. I first encountered her by the pool where Jax was showing me his improved butterfly stroke. "So you're the famous Jackson," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "The young man who's apparently irreplaceable." "I'm just here to help Jax, ma'am," I replied as politely as possible. "How convenient." Her eyes raked over me with barely concealed contempt. "And I'm sure my son-in-law compensates you handsomely for your dedication." Jax sensed the tension immediately. "Grandma, Jaxie is my friend." "Of course, darling." She smiled at him, but it didn't reach her eyes. Later I heard raised voices from the garden and recognized Eleanor's sharp tone cutting through Julian's controlled responses. I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but I couldn't help catching fragments. "Too young, Julian. Completely inappropriate. Far too involved with this family. He's excellent with Jax. That's what matters." "Is it really?" Her voice turned venomous. "Or is there something else happening here? I've seen how you watch him. I'm not blind to what's going on." My blood ran cold. Julian's response came out like shards of ice. "My private affairs are no longer your concern, Eleanor. You forfeited that right when you tried to take Jax from me after your daughter abandoned us. I'm protecting my grandson from your poor judgment. You're leaving. Now. Don't come back until you can be civil." I heard footsteps storming away, then silence. When I cautiously approached, Julian was standing rigid, fists clenched, breathing hard. "She suspects," he said without turning. Or she knows. What do we do? He finally looked at me, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. We don't give her power over us. I've spent my entire life worrying about appearances, about what people think. I'm done with that. He pulled me into his arms, holding tight, and I wrapped myself around him, offering what comfort I could. But that night, Jax woke screaming. We both ran to his room to find him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, his small body trembling. "She's gonna take you away," he sobbed. "Grandma said people like you always leave. You'll go just like Mommy did." My heart shattered. I scooped him up, cradling him against my chest while Julian stroked his hair. "Listen to me, Jax," I said firmly. "I am not leaving. Not now, not ever. I promised you. Remember? But Grandma said—" "Grandma was upset and said things she shouldn't have," Julian interrupted gently. "But Jackson isn't going anywhere. Right?" "Never," I confirmed. "I'm staying right here with both of you." Gradually, Jax's sobs quieted. He fell asleep in my arms, exhausted from crying. We tucked him in carefully, and when we stepped into the hallway, Julian took my hand. "We can't let her destroy this," he whispered fiercely. "We can't let anyone tear apart what we're building." "We won't," I promised, though uncertainty churned in my gut, because Eleanor had fired the first shot in a war I hadn't seen coming. And I had no idea how much damage she could inflict before this was over. Eleanor's assault began subtly but escalated quickly. Over the next few days, I noticed Julian fielding increasingly tense phone calls, board members questioning his judgment, whispers starting in business circles about concerning household dynamics. She was systematically attacking his reputation, trying to force his hand. Every evening after Jax fell asleep, Julian and I would retreat to either his study or the terrace, strategizing like generals planning a campaign. The stress was taking its toll. Julian had dark circles under his eyes, and I'd caught him staring into space during workouts, his mind clearly elsewhere. One night on the terrace, he gripped my hand tightly and said something that stopped my heart. "I'm considering going public, making an official statement about our relationship." I stared at him. "That's enormous, Julian. The media will have a field day. Your company can survive scrutiny," he interrupted. "I'm exhausted from hiding who I am, from compartmentalizing my life into acceptable pieces for public consumption. Jax deserves to grow up in a home where love isn't something shameful to conceal. And you deserve better than being my secret." Tears pricked my eyes. "You've really thought this through, more than anything in my life." He cupped my face in both hands. "I love you, Jackson, completely, and I want everyone to know it." "I love you too," I whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. We kissed beneath the stars, and for that moment everything felt possible. But Eleanor wasn't finished. The next day, a social worker arrived at the estate, clipboard in hand, expression professionally neutral. Mrs. Patterson introduced herself and explained she was conducting a home inspection following a report of potential child welfare concerns. My stomach dropped to my feet. Julian remained outwardly calm, but I saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. Mrs. Patterson was thorough. She examined every room, spoke with the staff, and spent over an hour alone with Jax. Then she requested individual interviews with Julian and me. When my turn came, I sat across from her in the formal living room, palms sweating. "Can you describe your role in this household, Jackson?" she asked kindly. "I'm Jax's swimming instructor and general caretaker. I live on the property to provide consistent support and stability." "And your relationship with Mr. Ashford?" I took a deep breath. Lying would only make things worse if discovered. "We're close. Beyond just employer and employee. We care deeply about each other." "Are you romantically involved?" My throat went dry, but I met her eyes steadily. "Yes, we are." She made notes without judgment. "And how does this relationship impact Jax?" "It doesn't negatively affect him at all. We're extremely careful. Jax's well-being, his happiness, his stability, those are our absolute priorities. Everything we do centers around what's best for him." The interview continued for another 20 minutes. When she finally left to speak with Julian, I waited in the hallway, physically unable to sit still. If she decided our household was unsuitable, she could recommend removing Jax. The thought made me nauseous. Julian emerged an hour later, his expression unreadable. I searched his face desperately for clues. "Well?" I managed to ask. He exhaled slowly. "She's recommending no action," said. "Jax is clearly thriving, happy, well-adjusted, secure. That while our household structure is unconventional, it's providing a loving and stable environment." Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. "Thank God." Julian pulled me into his arms right there in the hallway, not caring if anyone saw. "It's over. Eleanor can't touch us now." But that night proved Eleanor wasn't ready to surrender. She showed up at nearly midnight, pounding on the door, demanding to see Jax. Julian answered, blocking the doorway. "You're not welcome here. Leave. I will take you to court," she shrieked. "I'll prove this household is harmful. That perverted situation you're exposing my grandson to." Julian's voice dropped to a deadly calm that was somehow more frightening than shouting. "Try it. Social services has already cleared us. If you continue harassing my family, I'll file for a restraining order so fast it'll make your head spin. Now get off my property." Eleanor glared at both of us with pure venom before storming to her car and speeding away. Once she was gone, Julian sagged against the door, suddenly looking exhausted. "Is it really finished?" "Really finished," I confirmed. We checked on Jax, who was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the drama. Julian kissed his forehead gently and I smoothed back his curls. Our son, because that's what he'd become to me. Later, in Julian's room, there was no hesitation. We came together with a desperation born of relief and love and the knowledge that we'd survived the storm. Afterward, lying tangled together, Julian whispered against my hair, "Stay with me. Not just tonight. Always. Always," I promised. The next morning, Jax found us together in the kitchen making breakfast, a completely domestic scene that would have been impossible weeks ago. He bounced in, bright-eyed and cheerful. "Morning, Jaxie." "Morning, Dad." "Morning, champ," Julian replied, ruffling his son's hair. Jax tilted his head, studying us. "You both look really happy." Julian and I exchanged glances. Then he knelt to Jax's level, taking my hand and keeping his voice gentle. "Jax, we need to tell you something. Jackson and I, we care about each other very much. More than friends do." Jax's eyes widened. "Like in the romantic movies?" Julian smiled. "Exactly like that." For a moment Jax was silent, processing. Then his face split into the biggest grin I'd ever seen, and he launched himself at both of us, wrapping his small arms around us as far as they'd reach. "I knew it. I told Jaxie you liked him special. This is the best." We laughed, relief and joy washing over us in equal measure. "So you're okay with this?" Julian asked carefully. "Okay? This is amazing. Does this mean Jaxie stays forever now?" "Forever," I confirmed, my voice thick with emotion. "Best day ever," Jax cheered. And standing there in the kitchen with Julian's arm around my waist and Jax hugging our legs, I realized something profound. We'd become a family unconventional. Hard-won but absolutely real. The following months brought changes that transformed our lives in ways I'd never imagined possible. Julian gradually introduced our relationship to his inner circle. First his closest friends, then key business associates. The reactions varied from supportive to skeptical. But Julian never wavered. "Let them talk," he told me one evening as we shared wine on the terrace. "I have everything that matters right here." Jax adapted beautifully. He started telling everyone that Jaxie belongs to me and Dad now, and proudly informed his classmates about having 2 dads, even though I wasn't officially his parent yet. The other children took it in stride with the beautiful simplicity of youth, and Jax's confidence seemed to grow daily. One afternoon he climbed into my lap during story time and asked, "If you and Dad love each other, does that mean you could be my other dad? Like, officially?" My throat constricted with emotion. I looked at Julian, who was standing in the doorway with a soft smile on his face. "Would you like that?" I asked gently. "More than anything," Jax exclaimed, throwing his arms around my neck. Julian approached and placed his hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. No words were needed. A month later, Julian brought up the subject I'd been both hoping for and dreading. We were in his study and he pulled out a folder of legal documents. "I want to make this official," he said seriously. I want you to legally become Jax's co-parent. Full parental rights and responsibilities. I was overwhelmed. Are you absolutely certain? I've never been more certain about anything. His gray eyes held mine with unwavering conviction. You're already his father in every way that matters. This just makes it legal. We began the paperwork process. It would take months to finalize, but simply starting it felt monumental. Meanwhile, Jax was flourishing at school. His teachers commented on his improved social skills and academic engagement. The principal even called personally to commend us for providing such a nurturing environment. Each small victory felt like validation that we were doing something right. One evening, the three of us were by the pool. Jax playing on his inflatable float while Julian and I reclined on adjacent lounge chairs. The sun was beginning its descent, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Jax paddled over and climbed out, settling himself between us. I'm really happy, he announced simply, leaning against my shoulder while Julian's hand rested on his other shoulder. We are too, buddy, Julian replied, his voice thick with emotion. Jax looked up at me with those impossibly blue eyes. Thank you for staying, Jaxie, for not leaving like everyone else. My heart squeezed. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. And thank you for making Dad smile like he means it. Julian's eyes became suspiciously bright. He pulled both of us into a hug, and we stayed like that as the sun set, three people who'd found each other against all odds. Later that night, after Jax finally fell asleep following 3 stories and multiple requests for water, Julian and I retreated to our room. We lay facing each other, just existing in the comfortable silence we'd developed. I never imagined this, Julian murmured. Real happiness. A genuine family. Love that feels safe. You deserve all of it. I told him sincerely. So do you? He kissed my forehead, then my nose, then finally my lips. Thank you for taking a chance on us. On me. Best decision I ever made. We fell into comfortable silence again, just breathing in sync. Then Julian propped himself up on one elbow, his expression suddenly serious. Marry me, Jackson. I froze. What? I know this is fast. We still have plenty to figure out, but I don't want to wait. I want you officially part of this family as my husband, as Jax's legal parent. Marry me. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Yes. Absolutely yes. The kiss that followed was deep and passionate, sealing a promise that felt inevitable from the moment we'd first crossed that line. When we told Jax the next morning, he literally jumped up and down with excitement, running through the house announcing that he was getting 2 dads officially and everyone needed to know immediately. Julian pulled me close as we watched Jax's exuberant celebration. Ready for this? The chaos and joy and everything that comes with forever? I squeezed his hand. I was ready the moment I walked through your gates. His smile was genuine, free, completely unguarded. Months later, we held a small ceremony in the estate gardens. Close friends, carefully selected family members, and Jax as our ring bearer. He took his job incredibly seriously, walking down the aisle with the rings balanced on a small pillow, his face scrunched in concentration. When Julian and I exchanged vows with Jax standing between us, his small hands holding both of ours, everything finally felt complete. We promised to love each other, to support each other, and to always put Jax first. You may now kiss your husband, the officiant announced. Julian dipped me dramatically, making Jax shriek with laughter as we kissed. When we straightened, Jax was clapping enthusiastically. Best family ever, he shouted. And he was right. That evening, as the 3 of us sat together watching the stars emerge, I reflected on the impossible journey that had brought us here. I'd arrived at this estate as a broke college student looking for a paycheck. I was leaving as a husband, a father, and part of something I'd never dared dream of. A real family. Julian's arm wrapped around my shoulders while Jax dozed against my chest. And I realized this was what home felt like. Not a place, but the people who chose to love you completely. What are you thinking? Julian asked softly. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He kissed my temple. We all are. And under the vast expanse of stars, with my husband beside me and our son sleeping peacefully in my arms, I knew that despite all the complications and challenges we'd faced, this ending was perfect. We were home. Finally completely home.